Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you are in the used market and looking for a gaming PC that's not just gonna be competent now, but it's gonna be competent for a couple or a few years to come at the very least, this graphics card might be the best way to get the most bang for your buck. Let's take a look at the RX 480 4GB version, though to be fair, the 8GB version is also an awesome value right now on the used market. First, let's address why I'm talking about RX 480s and not 580s. The big thing for me is that this 4GB card can be readily had, or at least similar models can be readily had for $90 on eBay. That's a deal that pretty much anybody in the United States and a lot of other countries that have similar price conversions that don't suffer from hardware shortages, because I know some of you international viewers do live in a country where hardware is really hard to come by at reasonable prices. But if you're in a market that's similar to the United States, the 480, 4GB, and 8GB versions are a chunk cheaper than their 580 cousins. And even though the performance of a 580 is often a little bit better, it's often not so much better that it can make up a $15 difference in normal cases for the 480 versus the 580. So you can get this card or one very similar to it for $90 pretty much all day long on eBay right now, whereas a 580 you may get a good deal, and if you do get that good deal, go ahead and snap it up. But for the most part, the 580 4GB versions are going for more like $105. That's a $15 difference. Now, that may not seem like a lot to some people out there, but when you're looking for the best price to performance ratio you can find, that $15 is gonna give you a better return on the investment than spending it on the upgraded 580 version instead of the 480, because you're not getting about 15% better performance out of a 580 4GB version, at least in most games. And then the reason that I'm recommending the 480s over the 570s is because, referencing an NJ Tech video where they actually took a 480 4GB card and compared it to a 570 4GB card, we found that once again the 480 does consistently beat out the 570 in pretty much every single game out there that I was looking at, and it's a consistent margin there. So the 480, which goes for a very similar price as a lot of 570s on eBay, is probably better worth your money, especially if you're getting it at the identical price, as long as you have the power budget. And I can't imagine many people being able to fit in a 570 into a system and not the 480 4GB card. The 480 is the better value there as well. Now, anytime you start talking about the used market, especially with AMD cards, you have to bring up the mining craze from about a year and a half ago. Now, it is almost certain that this particular card was used in a mining farm, or at least a mining operation of some sort. And the reason I say that is the seller was selling several of these particular cards, and I did have to flash the BIOS. Now, that's something that I don't hope to see when I'm buying a used card, though I will say the seller did reach out to me directly about a day after I had gotten the card, and I had actually already flashed the BIOS and fixed the card because it wasn't running in Windows like it should have been. And he actually did reach out to me and say, hey, I got notified that some of these BIOS on these cards are a mining BIOS. Here's the flashing utility, here's how you do it. So he did reach out, and I assume that with the future cards that he's selling, maybe he'll go through and make sure that they have been flashed back to their stock BIOS for gaming. But it was a hoop that you just may have to jump through. Now, I could have also just looked at him and said, you know what, this is eBay, we have buyer protection, and sent the card back. Since I'm a little bit more tech savvy than I would say the average user, I was able to fix the card on my own, no problem, no harm, no foul. But your mileage may vary. Just know if you do get one of these mining cards that has not been flashed back to stock BIOS, that you can always send it back, or perhaps you get a seller that gives you step-by-step instructions. It is something that you have to consider. Also, with mining, you have to consider the fact that some of these cards may have been used very heavily for an extended period of time. So what about if the card goes bad? Well, my answer to that is basically that's a risk that you take on when you buy these cheap mining cards up. Now, at $90, I am willing to take that risk, knowing that even if this one goes bad, I can buy another one at roughly the same price and still come out right on par with buying a brand new 580 or a 570. Now, the next question to address when you're building a used system is just what kind of longevity can you expect out of the system? Now, if I'm looking at the used market, especially if I'm at the more budget end of things, which, to be honest, a $90 graphics card is probably gonna be more at the budget end of things, I'm hoping this system lasts 3 or 4 years with no problems at all, still able to run pretty much every modern AAA game at least 1080p, preferably 60 FPS. Based on the benchmarks that I run, and I didn't run overly heavy benchmarks because frankly my gaming library doesn't have a lot of super modern games to run on, but I did test out games like Fortnite, Resident Evil 2, the remake, as well as, what was the other one that I tested? Oh yeah, the original Tomb Raider reboot, which is back from 2013. So all of these games are fairly either old or they're fairly easy to run, but thankfully with a 4770K running at 4.5 gigahertz, this card absolutely dominated those games at high settings at 1080p, which does give me confidence that this card is not going out of fashion completely anytime soon. I would imagine that over the next few years, this card will still be able to run modern AAA games at 60 FPS. You may have to start playing with the settings a little bit, depending on just how heavy those games are, but a lot of these games that we're seeing in the modern day, things like Apex Legends, Fortnite, or other esports games that may pop up in the near future, those games are all going to be easily attainable at 60 FPS plus. And if you have a high refresh rate monitor like I do, you can actually take great advantage of that with a lot of these games, even with a card as inexpensive as $90. So all these things in consideration, all these things combined, lead me to say that this is, if not the top end price performance card out there that's readily available to everybody, it is one of the top dogs out there. The 480s, both the 8GB versions, which are a little bit pricier than the 4GB versions. You can find the 8GB ones for about $100 all day long on eBay right now. Of course, that market might change a little bit, but this is one of the top dogs when it comes to price to performance when you're trying to build a used PC. I highly recommend, if you are in the market for this tier of card, or you have a budget for a graphics card of about $100, I wouldn't spend $100 on a new card because you're not going to get anywhere near the performance that you will by spending it on the used market like this. So this is the card that I would recommend for something like that. But of course, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about the RX 480s? Is this a card that is in the rearview mirror and it's not really relevant anymore? Or do you think this is a card that, especially on the used market, is still very relevant and it might even be something you would consider buying for your own system? Let me know what you think about this guy in those comments down below. And of course, if you like this video and you want to see me take a look at a little bit older hardware more often and maybe add games to my benchmarking suite, because that's something I actually want to invest some money in, more modern games. But regardless, if you like all that stuff, hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell notification. All those things help out the channel a lot. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.